All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into race and history,
Yeah.
you know, going way beyond those standard textbooks.
Okay.
We're going to be digging into this fascinating article called Unwritten Histories, What History Books Don't Teach Us About Race.
Sounds good.
Um, I'm betting you felt this too, like there are these gaps in what we're taught about history,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to race and, its role in history.
absolutely. It's like we're given this simplified version of the past, just a highlight reel, really. It
Yeah.
misses so much of the nuance and complexity.
Exactly. And this article really digs into that. It starts by talking about how traditional history books often focus on just a narrow set of events and figures,
Right?
leaving out a lot of the experiences and contributions of marginalized communities.
Hmm.
It's like you're trying to understand a forest, but you're only looking at the tallest trees.
Hmm.
What about all the life, teeming beneath the canopy?
Yeah, right. And what's even more crucial is that that limited perspective can actually warp our understanding of the historical context.
Oh, wow.
It's not just about missing information. It's about how those missing pieces fundamentally change the interpretation of events.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
So how does this article suggest we approach history differently?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of including marginalized voices and perspectives.
Okay.
Think about it. If history is only told from the perspective of those in power, what stories are we missing? Whose voices are being silenced?
That's a powerful point. So whose stories are we missing? The article spends quite a bit of time on the legacy of colonialism, right?
Yeah.
It argues that a lot of history books kind of gloss over the complexities of how colonialism impacted societies,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to race.
Yeah, and that simplification can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Colonialism wasn't just about conquering territories. It was
Right.
about imposing these systems of control and hierarchy, and race played a huge role in that.
Can you give me like a specific example? I'm having trouble picturing how that played out.
Sure. Take the British Empire in India, for example.
Okay.
The British created this racial hierarchy that placed them at the top. Uh-huh.
Using concepts of whiteness and civilization to justify their rule.
Wow.
They implemented policies that favored certain groups, which created divisions within Indian society that persist even today.
Wow. So these ideas of race weren't always there. They were actually created to serve colonial interests.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's why understanding colonialism is crucial for understanding race today. Those systems didn't just disappear when colonial rule ended. They continue to influence social structures, power dynamics, and economic disparities in many parts of the world.
It's starting to feel like those seemingly distant historical events actually cast a very long shadow.
Absolutely. We see echoes of those colonial legacies in things like systemic racism and inequality.
Hmm.
It raises the question, how can we effectively address present-day racial conflicts if we don't fully understand the historical context that shaped them?
Okay, so digging deeper into history helps us make sense of what's happening today. What else does the article highlight? It also delves into the role of social movements in shaping our understanding of race. Think about movements like the Civil Rights Movement in the U.S., the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, or indigenous rights movements around the world.
Right. These movements were all about pushing back against injustice and demanding equality.
Exactly. And what's interesting is how these movements often challenge that single narrative that traditional history books might present. They highlight the diversity of voices and strategies within these movements, pushing back against simplistic portrayals.
So it wasn't just one big unified front. Even within a movement, there were different ideas about how to create change.
Precisely, take the Civil Rights Movement, for example.
Okay.
The article contrasts the philosophies of Martin Luther King Jr., who advocated for nonviolent resistance, with figures like Malcolm X, who embraced a more confrontational approach.
So even within a movement fighting for the same goal, there were different approaches.
Right.
That makes sense. It wasn't just a straight line from point A to point B. It was messy and complex.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that these movements weren't just about race in isolation. They were intertwined with other social issues like poverty education and access to basic resources.
That brings to mind the idea of intersectionality, which I've heard a lot about but never fully understood. This article touches on that too, right?
It does, and it's a crucial concept for understanding the complexities of race and history.
Okay.
Essentially, intersectionality helps us recognize that people's experiences are shaped by the interplay of multiple social categories like race, gender, sexuality, class, religion, and so on.
I'm starting to get it. So it's not just about being black or white, male or female. It's about how all those different parts of a person's identity come together.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Two people might both face challenges related to race, but their experiences will be vastly different depending on their gender, their economic status, their sexual orientation, and so on.
Okay, that's a helpful way to think about it. This is
Oh.
blowing my mind wide open.
And that's what's so exciting about exploring unwritten histories. It's about challenging those oversimplified narratives and embracing the complexity of the past.
I'm starting to see that. This idea of unwritten histories isn't just about adding a few missing facts.
Yeah.
It's a whole different way of looking at the past. But this is a lot to process. Maybe we should pause here. I think I'm ready for more. Before we pause, we were starting to unpack this idea of intersectionality.
Yeah.
It feels like there are so many layers to history that I never even considered before.
That's the beauty of it. Uncovering those layers can be so enriching. And it reminds us that history isn't just about dates and events.
Right.
It's about people's lives, their struggles, their triumphs, and the legacy of those experiences.
So how do we go about uncovering those layers, those unwritten histories? What do the articles suggest?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of language.
Okay.
The words we use, the terminology we choose, it all shapes how we understand race and history.
That's interesting. Can you give me an example?
Sure, think about the terms we use to describe different racial groups. They've evolved over time, reflecting changing societal values and a growing awareness of the need for respectful and inclusive language. For instance, the shift from colored to Negro to African American reflects a growing understanding of Black identity and a rejection of terms rooted in oppression.
That makes sense. Language isn't static, is it?
Right.
It's constantly evolving as our understanding of the world changes.
Precisely, and that evolution is reflected in our historical narratives as well. The article points out that the language used in older historical texts can perpetuate harmful stereotypes, even unintentionally. It's like those terms carry baggage from a time when our understanding of race was less nuanced.
So we need to be careful about the sources we're using and how those sources might be framing the past.
Exactly. It's a reminder to always be questioning and seeking out multiple perspectives. Don't just accept the dominant narrative at face value. Dig deeper, explore alternative sources, and consider the voices that might have been marginalized or silenced.
So it's not just about what's written. It's about who's doing the writing and whose voices are being amplified.
Precisely. And speaking of voices, the article really stresses the importance of recognizing the histories of resistance and resilience within marginalized communities.
Okay.
It's crucial to remember that people haven't just passively accepted oppression throughout history. They've actively fought back, challenged the status quo, and created their own narratives of strength and survival.
That makes me think about figures like Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus.
Yeah.
She's one of those icons of resistance, but there must be so many other stories out there that we don't hear about.
Absolutely. The article highlights figures like Ida B. Wells, the incredible journalist and activist who played a pivotal role in the anti-lynching movement.
Oh, wow.
She bravely exposed the horrors of lynching and galvanized others to fight for justice.
Well, she used her voice to fight for change. That's so powerful.
It is. And it wasn't just individuals like Ida B. Wells. The article also talks about the collective power of grassroots organizations and movements like the Civil Rights Movement or Black Lives Matter.
These were movements that brought people together to demand change.
Think about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC.
Okay.
They were instrumental in organizing protests, voter registration drives, and community programs that challenged segregation and empowered Black communities. They understood the power of collective action and how it could be used to disrupt systems of oppression.
It feels like you can draw a line from those movements to the activism we see today.
Yeah.
People are still organizing, still fighting for justice, still demanding that their voices be heard.
Absolutely. The fight for equality is ongoing. And understanding those historical struggles can inspire and inform our own activism today.
This article has me thinking about the idea of global perspectives on race. The article encourages us to look beyond the Western narrative.
Yes. It's essential to consider how different cultures have unique histories and social dynamics related to race. Right.
The concept of race itself can vary across cultures. What might be considered Black in one context could be understood completely differently in another.
Do you have an example of that?
Sure, in some parts of Latin America, racial categories are often more fluid and based on a spectrum of physical characteristics rather than strict classifications. It's a different way of understanding race that challenges the more rigid categories we often see in the US or Europe.
That's fascinating. So the way we think about race isn't universal. It's actually shaped by our cultural context.
Precisely, and exploring those diverse perspectives can enrich our understanding of race and history on a global scale.
This deep dive has really emphasized the power of personal narratives. The article talks about how these stories can offer a counter-narrative to the dominant historical accounts and humanize abstract concepts like racism and inequality.
Exactly. Personal narratives allow us to connect with history on a human level.
Yeah.
They give us a glimpse into the lived experiences of individuals who navigated these complex issues of race and identity. So instead of just reading about segregation in a textbook, we might hear a first-hand account from someone who lived through that era. We'd hear about their fears, their hopes, their struggles. That would make history so much more real and relatable.
Precisely. And those personal stories can challenge the official narratives we've been taught. They can offer alternative perspectives, shed light on hidden truths, and reveal the complexities that traditional history books often miss.
This deep dive is really making me rethink how I approach history. It's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the forces that shaped the world we live in today and recognizing the voices that have often been silenced or marginalized.
I couldn't agree more. It's about embracing the richness and complexity of the past and recognizing that history is an ongoing conversation, not a fixed set of facts.
So how do we keep that conversation going? What did the article say about moving forward?
It emphasizes the need for a more inclusive and comprehensive approach to teaching history, both within schools and beyond. We need to move away from those dry textbooks and create a more engaging and thought-provoking learning environment.
Okay, I'm all for making history more engaging, but how do we actually do that?
The article suggests incorporating more diverse primary sources like letters, diaries, and oral histories. Imagine students reading a letter from a civil rights activist or hearing a first-hand account from someone who experienced the horrors of the Holocaust.
That would be so much more powerful than just reading a textbook summary. It would make history come alive.
Exactly, and it would encourage students to think critically about those sources, to consider the perspectives of those who lived through those events.
I love that idea. But it can't just be about changing what happens in classrooms, right?
All right.
We all have a responsibility to be more critical consumers of history.
Absolutely. We need to be questioning the narratives we encounter, seeking out diverse perspectives, and engaging in thoughtful conversations about the past.
So it's not just about what we learn in school. It's about how we continue to learn and grow throughout our lives. It's about being curious, being open-minded, and being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that history is not just something that happened in the past.
Right.
It's alive and continues to shape the world we live in today.
This conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of all there is to learn about unwritten histories.
And that's the exciting part. There's always more to discover, more to learn, more to understand.
Well, we're about out of time for today, but I definitely want to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, me too. It's a lifelong journey, a journey of discovery and exploration.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into unwritten histories, what's the one key takeaway you really want listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that history is far more nuanced and complex than we often realize.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to race. It's like we've been looking at a tapestry from only one angle, and now we're finally starting to see the full picture, with all its intricate threads and vibrant colors.
I love that analogy. We've been talking about uncovering those hidden layers and challenging the single narrative. It sounds like embracing that complexity is key to really understanding the past.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that history isn't just something that happened in the past. It's alive, and it continues to shape the world we live in today. Understanding the unwritten histories, the marginalized voices, the diverse perspectives, that's key to building a more just and equitable future.
So this isn't just about being a history buff.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves and the world around us better.
Exactly. It's about connecting with the past in a way that informs our present and shapes our future. It's about recognizing that we're all part of this ongoing story.
I'm wondering, what's one question you'd want our listeners to ponder as they go about their day?
Okay.
Something that might spark further exploration based on what we've discussed.
That's a great question. I think I'd ask, what unwritten histories might be hidden within your own community or family?
Oh, wow.
Every town, every family has stories that haven't been told, perspectives that haven't been shared. Uncovering those stories can be a powerful way to connect with your own history and contribute to a more complete understanding of the past.
Wow, that's such a powerful thought.
Mhm.
It's a reminder that history isn't just something we read about in books. It's all around us. It's
Yeah.
in our families, our communities, our own personal experiences.
And those personal stories, those hidden histories, they're just waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah.
They have the power to challenge our assumptions, enrich our understanding, and connect us to the past in a profound way.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like my mind has been stretched in all sorts of new directions.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Remember, history is a journey, not a destination. Keep asking questions, keep seeking out diverse voices, and keep challenging those single narratives.
Well said. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into unwritten histories. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep uncovering those hidden truths. Until next time.